Chapter 3. The only thing I could hear was my own breath. It was so loud that it sounded like there were 6 scared people locked in that shed. I closed my eyes and thought real hard about making my breathing slow down. Pretty soon it sounded like 5 other breathers in the shed had left. I was still scared, but now it was the get real excited and want to move around kind of scared. It didn't take too long for my eyes to get used to the dark. It was a gray gas can in the corner next to a bunch of gray rakes and a pile of gray rags and gray tire next to some gray fishing poles. Maybe Mr. Amos only had pretended to lock the door, so I reached my hand towards the gray knob, and as quick as that, I went from kind of being calm in one stand in one place with spit drooling down in front of your shirt, kind of scared. Halfway up the door, there are 3 little flat monster heads guarding the doorknob. Each head had a little round eyes guarding right at me. The eyes were the only thing that in the shed that weren't gray. They were a bright yellow with big black spot in the middle. I dropped my blanket and my pillow and stepped back until my legs hit the wood pile behind me. From all the fast breathing going on, you'd have thought the 5 other scared people had come back and brought a couple of scared friends with them. Each head had a wide mouth open and sharp sets of pointy teeth and lips smiling back, ready to bite. It felt like the shed was getting smaller and smaller, and the little mouths were getting closer and closer. Then I knew what I was looking at. The doorknob guards were 3 dried-out fish heads that someone had nailed to the door. I ran to the pile of rags and poked one of them with my shoe to make sure there weren't any rats or centipedes hiding under it. Then I picked it up and hung it over the fish heads so I couldn't see them any more, and they couldn't see me. I picked my blanket and pillow up, and I had decided that the best way to sleep I knew the floor was no good. I'd bet all sorts of bugs and roaches were crawling around there. I remember what happened to my best friend Bugs when a cockroach crawled into his ear one night at the home. 4 grown folks had held Bugs down without whilst they tried to pull it out with a pair of tweezers, but the only thing they did was pull out a roach's back legs off. They were digging around in Bug's ears with those tweezers. You'd have thought they were pulling out his legs off, not some cockroaches. I've never heard a kid scream that loud. After about 15 minutes, Bug screaming the joint down, they said they were going to have to take him to the emergency room to get the roach out. It was almost morning when Bugs got back. Everyone was asleep except me. I waited until they put him in his bed and turned off the lights. I said, "Did they get it out?" He said, "Oh, hi, Bud. Yeah, they got him." "Did it hurt? A lot?" "Nope." "Were you scared?" "Nope." "Then how come you were screaming so doggone loud?" He said, "I didn't know I was. I probably couldn't help me screaming 'cause that roach was so loud." I'd seen lots of roaches, but I never heard one of them make a sound. I said, "Loud how?" "Well, bugs ain't so different from you as you think." As soon as they saw those tweezers coming at him, he was pretty terrified and commenced screaming in English, too, not some bug language like you'd expect from a roach. "Yeah? What'd he say?" "He kept yelling, 'My legs! My legs! Why have they done this to my legs?'" And the true story about bugs started getting called, and that's the true story of how bugs got started to be called bugs. I'd bet $1,000 there are roaches on that floor of this shed just waiting to crawl in someone's ear, and I'd bet those Amoses wouldn't even have tried to pull the roach out. And who knows how long I'd have had to listen to some terrified roach screaming his head off right up against my eardrum. So I spread the blanket on top of the wood pile and climbed up on it. This put me so I was even with the window. I took pieces of bark and brushed the spider webs from the front of the windows, and I put my hand on the glass to see if the newspaper was pasted from the inside or the outside. I touched paper, so I spread my fingers, in my hands like a yellow jacket bumblebee, yellow with black stripes. This was a great place to have a shadow puppet, so I made my hand to be a wolf, and then a dog, and then a duck. And after that, I got to be pretty good boring. I scraped up the paper with my fingernails so I could see outside. But I like to keep my nails bit down real low, and the paper didn't budge. I took out my jackknife and I tried scraping the newspaper with it. The paper peeled away in little curly yellow strips, like that yellow stuff rich people throw in New York New Year's Eve. I finally got a hole big enough so I could look out and mashed my eye against up the glass. I could see the back of the Amos's house real clear. There was a light on. That had to be Mr. and Mrs. Amos's bedroom. The little bit of light that came through the hole in the paper made me get calm enough that I could lay my head on my pillow and take a nap. When I blinked my eyes open, the first thing I noticed was the light from the Amos's bedroom was out. The next thing I noticed made me wish I'd stayed asleep. The very top of the shed was the biggest vampire bat you'd ever see. It was hanging upside down, asleep, but the smell of me rising up to him would probably wake him up any minute. I reached over the window and tried to slide it open. It budged an inch. I rolled off the woodpile, crawled towards the door with the fish head guards. I reached my hand up and the doorknob turned. Mr. Amos was trying to help me, but the door opened with a crack and a padlock and a chain on the outside held it tight. It looked I looked back up at the rafters to see if that bat had woke up. He was still sound asleep. Just like that, there's a time that a smart person knows enough is enough. There's a time when you know you've got to fight. I was about to let that vampire suck my blood dry without a war. He could kiss my wrist if he thought that was going to happen. So I got up off my knees, picked up a gray rake, walked over to the woodpile, cool as a cucumber, but inside every part of my guts was shaking, and I stood on that woodpile. I held that rake like it was a Louisville slugger. I eyed that bat, who was sleeping, and revved the rake like I was going to hit a 400-yard home run. Just before I swung, I remember another one of Bud Caldwell's rules and things for having a funner life and making a better liar out of yourself. Rules and things number 328. When you make up your mind to do something, hurry up and do it. If you wait, you might talk yourself out of what you wanted to do in the first place. Shucks. I couldn't remember for sure if you killed a vampire by driving a stake in his heart or by shooting it with a silver bullet. If I was wrong and didn't kill that bat right away, I was going to be trapped in a shed with a vampire bat who was probably going to be real upset with someone who had woke him up by whacking him with a rake. So I took my jackknife out of my pocket, pulled the blade open. That way, if I didn't kill him with the rake and came up down and it came up or down fussing or tussling on the floor, maybe a silver blade in the heart would be just as good as a silver bullet, unless that was what you had to do with werewolves. So I raised my rake over my head. Again, I closed my eyes and I swung it like I was Paul Bunyan chopping down a tree with one blow. I felt the rake jerk a little when it hit the bat. I opened my eyes just in time to see the vampire bat cut right in half. I was kind of surprised. It didn't scream or cry or say, "Curse you's got me!" Instead, the only sound I heard was a kind of rattling, like a couple of pieces of paper rubbing together, like dry leaves blowing around the wind. The next sound I heard was even worse than that. If a vampire said, "Ah, you doggone kid, that hurt, but now I get revenge," it sounded like I turned on a buzz saw in the shed. All of a sudden, it felt like someone had stuck a red hot nail right into my left cheek. My hand reached up and grabbed my cheek, and I felt something creepy and prickly there. And I thought, brought my hand down. It was holding the biggest, maddest hornet I'd ever seen. I squeezed my hand shut and put the other sting on my palm. What I thought was a vampire bat hanging in the ceiling was really a hornet's nest, and now there are about 600 hornets flying around the tiny shed, and each and every one of them was looking for me. Another fire nail went through my knee, and a second one into my sock. Maybe this is why the other kid that they had found in here had been as big as a whale. He was all swollen up from hornet stings. So I dropped my shoulder down and charged at the door with all my might. The door banged against the lock, but it didn't budge an inch. All that happened was the rag I'd covered the fish head with came off, and I bounced back and landed square on the floor. I jumped up again. This time I charged at the door, and put my hand out like Paul Bunyan running down the football field. This wasn't a real good idea. I forgot all about those fish head door guards. My fingers went right into the mouth of the biggest one, of the little needle teeth cut me like a razor. So I pulled my hand back and screamed. Another hornet buzzed into my ear, and it felt like someone had poured hot wax right down my into my brain. The only thing I could think of was to jump on the woodpile and bust the glass of the window open. So I grabbed the handles of the window, gave him one more jerk. I guess being scared gives you a lot more strength, because this time the window flew open with a loud bang. 3 hornets found me at the same time, and all four of us fell out of the window. As soon as we hit the ground, I rolled far away from the shed as I could. I smacked and whacked the hornets. They had taken a ride on me and laid there until I could catch my breath. After a while, the fish guard bite quit hurting so much. I started getting madder and madder. I was mad at those Amoses, but most of all, I was mad at me for believing there really was a vampire bat in that shed, and for getting trapped like there wasn't anybody who cared what happened to me. So I simmered down and started thinking about getting even. I wonder how hard I'd have to pull that trigger on that double barrel shotgun for it to go off. So I sneaked up the back porch steps to get into the house. Maybe the vampire bat didn't say it, but the only thought in my head was, "Ah, you doggone Amoses, that hurt. But now I get my revenge."